Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Trust and Estates webinar, Managing Risk and Avoiding a Client Crisis in Life Insurance. I'm Susan Lipp, Editor-in-Chief of Trust and Estates magazine, and in a moment I'll be turning things over to our presenters. Henry Montag is a certified financial planner in practice since 1976 with offices in Long Island and New York. He is a principal of the TOLI Center East and has lectured extensively on the proper utilization of financial products.
Thank you, Susan, and thanks to those that are listening. I've spent the last 36 years as an independent certified financial planner concentrating in the accumulation, the conservation, and the distribution of assets. As Randy stated, the current state of affairs in the insurance industry is problematic, to say the least, for clients, beneficiaries, as well as for their advisors. Today, I'm going to be discussing the conservation of one's life insurance that's allocated to the next generation. I'm going to briefly discuss the history of how we got here with a case study, as well as some solutions to fix the problem, and most importantly, how to avoid problems in the future. My objective today is simple: to leave you with two usable ideas that are beneficial to your clients and your practice. There are three types of policies. Up until the 1980s, it was like going to a Carvel's ice cream store. There were two flavors. It was chocolate was the whole life, and vanilla was the term, and they were both guaranteed. Then in the early 80s, we discovered what I call the Baskin-Robbins effect with many flavors, and that's where the flexible premium first came into use. And all of these are not guaranteed. Whole life insurance, if you pay the premium in full, it's guaranteed. But as soon as one begins blending whole life and term, it affects the guarantees. Primarily when people use dividends to pay the premiums, and then we find that dividends get reduced, that certainly affects the guarantees. Whole life also requires the most cash outlay and provides proportionally the smallest death benefit. It's a good vehicle for tax-deferred accumulation. Term insurance, wonderful product, guaranteed the entire time that the death benefit. Only 2% of term insurance, however, ever gets collected. Some of the perfect uses for it are for family income, creating a college fund, providing for a mortgage, anything that's basically short-term in nature, and there are no accumulations involved. Variable insurance, wonderful product, excellent for people who are more risk-adverse, but if you assume an aggressive return and fall short, the contract will expire much earlier than expected because, as you can see, nothing is guaranteed, neither the death benefit, nor the duration, nor the premiums, nor any cash accumulations. I'm going to skip through this one. Universal life. Universal life basically depends on the action or the inaction of the trustee. In other words, how long that product lasts is completely dependent on the action or the inaction of those responsible for it, because neither the premium is guaranteed nor is the duration of coverage. Again, it's good for a maximum death benefit with minimum premiums. I like to think of Universal as a term policy on steroids without the guarantee. A couple of facts about universal life insurance. Or I should say a little bit of history first. Back in the early 70s, as Randy mentioned, interest rates were always hovering around 5-6%. Then we hit the 1980s when interest rates climbed above 21% for the first time in history. So people had a choice. Do I stick with my cash value, that's where the insurance companies are paying me 3%, or do I walk across the street and pick up a CD or even a money market and obtain an 18 to 21% return, plus that toaster oven or microwave that was usually given away as well? So these higher interest rates resulted in what I consider unreasonable expectations for individuals. Billions of dollars left the cash value and went on to banks and CDs. It took E.F. Hutton, the investment firm, to create an insurance division, and that insurance division in 1983 first created a universal policy. Within 2 years, 60% of all companies had some sort of a universal policy. So while everyone was concentrating on the interest rates, few were concentrating on the lack of guarantees that the product had. A couple of facts about universal insurance. In June 2014, a Harris poll was conducted. Of private owners, it's felt that over 60% felt that their premiums were set in stone, that nothing had to change. 45% of individuals between 1983 and 2003, 45% were purchasing a non-guaranteed product. 70% of amateur trustees had not reviewed their policies in over 12 years. Now, who are these amateur trustees? Well, 90% of individual insurance policies were owned by what I consider the amateur trustee, which is usually the eldest or closest living child, and only 10% were managed by institutional trustees. As a result, approximately 23% of those non-guaranteed policies are today expiring prematurely due to the inaction and due to the reduced interest rates. Now, what happens when interest rates go up? Everything is good. The length of coverage on a universal policy can be increased, the premiums can be reduced, and the dividends on whole life policies can even be increased. However, when interest rates decrease, as they had over the last 20 some odd years, the length of coverage, the duration decreases. The premiums should be increased, and usually on whole life policies, the dividends decrease. Let's take a look at a case study. So we have a male age 60 who purchases $1 million, and when he or she spoke with his or her agent, it was assumed that the product would last, that the policy would last up until age 95. The next question was, well, what interest rate should we assume? Well, when interest rates may have been 12, 13, 14%, one might have thought that a 10 to 12% interest rate was reasonable. Hopefully, some of the agents or brokers brought it down a little bit more reasonable, down perhaps to an 8 or 9%. So, for an individual to have purchased $1 million of coverage to age 95, I didn't say guaranteed, just to age 95, that premium would have been $14,000. Now, back then, in the early 80s, we had taxable estates of over $1 million became taxable. So the most appropriate next step was to avoid estate taxes. Someone would suggest, let's have it owned by a trust. Well, who should be the trustee? Naturally, the question was answered by my oldest son or daughter, and there was no mention made of the duration of coverage period. There was no mention made of changing interest rates, any strategy, or the need for active management, nor about the trustee qualifications or any of the skills that that individual should have had. Fast forward 30 years later, where are we? Well, that 8 to 9 interest rate was not achieved. We had an average of 4.1% actually achieved. Today, at that $14,000 premium to obtain that $1 million of insurance, that policy will expire today, 30 years later, in 2017, at the insured's age 89. The premium needed today to bring that policy, that $1 million coverage, back to age 95 would be $26,000. The current premium of $14,000 today merely would provide $450,000 of coverage rather than $1 million to keep it to age 95. These are the results of buy and hold rather than buy and manage. Universal life insurance is a good flexible product, but does not come with an automatic self-management aspect. So we say that the policy will last basically as long as, or it should all depend on the action or the inaction of the advisor. Let's take a look at the insurance agent or the attorney or the CPA. The attorney's role, he or she may gather all the relevant facts, review the client intentions, discuss the trustee, the beneficiary, the owner, as well as discuss the administrative and some of the crummy provisions. Hopefully, he or she will also discuss some of the trustee's roles and duties, but usually not involved in providing guidance, ongoing guidance to the amateur trustee, doesn't discuss or involved in the need to monitor or review policy's performance, and neither is involved in managing or adjusting the life insurance premium. CPA may confirm that the life insurance is required, may confirm the adequate cash flow is available, and prepares the trust or gift tax returns, but is usually, again, not involved in pointing out the problems, the performance evaluations, nor the annual monitoring, nor most importantly, attesting to the adequacy of premium payments, meaning that there's enough premium in the policy to be able to bring it to either normal life expectancy or perhaps 4 or 5 years beyond normal life expectancy. The private trustee, usually the oldest child or those living closest to the grantor. It's a great honor. He's asked or she's asked to sign the life insurance contract as the owner, but my experience has been is that they're absolutely unaware of the assumed fiduciary liability. They're unaware of the performance risk that they assumed, and they're unaware that they should be actively managing the policy. How could they? They don't have the skills to monitor, review, or adjust premiums based on the changing economic conditions. Most importantly, there's no one there to guide them. And a trustee can't avoid the fiduciary liability, as we have in Rafford versus Mayer, a Nebraska case. The trustee has a non-waivable duty to its beneficiaries, and we're now beginning to see lawsuits in that regard. The traditional agent's role, what's his or her function? The agent should be providing service to their clients, but in my opinion, there's no incentive to service that existing policy beyond that first year. The lion's share of commissions earned are earned up front. Whether it's 50, 60, 75, 80, 90%, the majority of that commission is earned up front, and there's only perhaps a 5% commission for ongoing service. Whether the agent is embarrassed for not having provided sufficient services, whether it's the fact that a high percentage leave, retire, resulting in many orphans that aren't taken care of by anyone, whether it's the fact that agents try to sell rather than service orphans, the fact remains that clients don't understand the policy, nor trust the agents, nor want to talk about this, and as a result, they leave that policy in the bottom left-hand drawer, and that's what cultivates the problem. I'll pause here with a quote from the senior editor of the Wall Street Journal, and this endorsement appeared as an endorsement on the back of our book. Just very briefly, I've written multiple stories over the past 5 years for the Wall Street Journal about the impact of low interest rates on universal life policies. The problem is exacerbated because many people underfunded their policies, often unaware of how important it was to keep them well funded. Of the many consumers I've interviewed, most don't understand how the policies actually work. Many have long since lost contact with the sales agents. I see many consumer responses to the stories as the problem is so recurring. So why is this evaluation needed, and why is it so important? Because things change. As we saw, market conditions change from high interest rates to low interest rates. There are substantial product innovations. Today, for instance, an individual can withdraw money to pay for long-term care on a tax-free basis directly from the death benefit. Individuals' objectives change. We need to realign our current holdings with our actual objectives today. So let's discuss some fixes and some preventative measures to be able to avoid future problems. So what needs to be done? Well, two things. One, there are various remediation options, and then there are various acronyms, which I'll discuss in just 1 second. What are the remediation options? Well, we can certainly reduce the face amount. We can certainly pay a higher premium. We can try to obtain a new contract if, in fact, the medicals allow us to do this. We can sell a life insurance policy similar to the way that we would sell an automobile or a house. The worst option is to basically be able to surrender or lapse that policy. Or we could simply convert the policy, the cash value, to some sort of an income stream to pay for additional income or to pay for long-term care insurance, long-term care costs, rather. The objectives are basically to be able to lengthen the guaranteed duration of coverage and to realign those holdings with whatever is our objectives today. Let's take a look at a quick case study. Here's an individual who had 2 kids, and all they wanted to do was to be able to leave an inheritance for their grandchildren. There was no intention of ever using the cash value. They just wanted to provide a maximum death benefit. So they bought a $1 million second-to-die policy, paying $16,000. In my conversations, when I heard that they had no intentions of ever using that cash value, I realized that they basically had the wrong product. Rather than having a whole life policy that builds up cash value, I was able to show them a guaranteed, second to die, $2 million product for that same $16,000 premium. That's what happens when you align the right product with the client's current or corrected objectives. Very simply, an adequate funding statement is what I refer to that the accountant could or should provide, perhaps as one of the most important aspects, is to make certain that the premiums that the grantor or the trustee is paying is sufficient to be able to carry that policy up until whatever time period the grantor or the trustee or the insured decided that they wanted to keep that policy. UPIA very simply said, we've got to treat a life insurance policy like any other asset, and it's subject to review and monitoring. Imagine if someone had a real estate portfolio and they just left it sitting there for years without looking at it, or a stock and bond portfolio without making any adjustments. That broker or broker for the real estate or agent or broker would be fired, would be censured, would be fined for doing that. But it happens all the time with life insurance. The investment policy statement, it basically clarifies the role of each ILIT participant. It just shows, and it provides the guidance. What's the purpose of the policy? What's the intent for the specific beneficiary's needs? It's just evaluating today's risk and what type of action should be made in the event that that policy needs to be restored. So we've spoken about the insurance agent, the attorney, the CPA, the trustee. Let's weigh in for a moment on the insurance industry's posturing, on the insurance industry's feeling. Well, very simply, the life agent or broker, their prime responsibility is to market, not manage. The insurer obligation is merely to provide a policy and to provide an annual statement. Everything that I've just mentioned encourages what I consider a buy and hold mentality. There's no incentive on the part of the insurance company to be able to help that client. Today we talk about DOL, about doing what's in the best interest of the client. As far as I'm concerned, in terms of the insurance industry, it's to do what's the best thing for the shareholders of the insurance company, not necessarily to be able to provide a best case scenario for that individual insured. Right now, we're in the middle of, as a result of what I consider the insurance companies having created a perfect storm. In addition to the sustained low interest rates and neglect, the insurance companies have begun currently increasing the COIs, the cost of insurance. This is the first time that they've ever done this, further exacerbating an already deteriorating situation. What they've basically done is said, contractually, we're able to increase these expenses, and that's exactly what they've done. Why? Perhaps it's to, well, let me put it this way. Many insurers are content with the current situation because if the insurance lapses, then that's really in the insurance company's best interest. And let's just take a look at something that might be of interest to everyone on board. This is a copy of a 6-page report, which is the annual statement that goes to the insurance company. Keep in mind, this is a 6-page report, and on the bottom of page 3, we notice the annual notice of important statement. That's all the way down to the bottom, teeny print, and that says that, be aware, if interest rates change, it could affect your death benefits duration. Well, if this was really an important notice, shouldn't it be in big, bold, red letters on the top of the statement instead of being buried at the bottom of page 3? I just want to conclude by just saying that everyone is best served when advisors collaborate. Everyone has their own specialized area of knowledge or skills, and the best thing that we as advisors can do is to communicate amongst each other it's good for the client, and it's also good for our business. Whether it's creating individual study groups, whether it's advising clients before there's a problem, we have two choices. We can talk about what happened and why after the fact, or we can make people aware that there may be a problem and avoid a problem before it becomes a problem. In dealing with today's facts, what was good yesterday may not be good today. Contract performances need to be examined. People may no longer need life insurance. And what happens when you actually align somebody's life insurance based on today's facts? Well, here's a situation. Individual purchased a policy back in 2002. And in 2016, we found out that that individual was no longer a smoker. Well, when we did that, we were able to take a $24,000, $300 premium, which was only guaranteed to age 86, and extend that to age 95, and at the same time reduce the premium to $19,400, just by asking the question. History repeats itself. Everything that we just mentioned has taken place between 1983 and 2002. In 2003, the insurance industry finally decided to create a guaranteed universal product, and those products have been around since. And as Randy mentioned earlier, 11% of current products today, guaranteed products today, are already lapsing, specifically because people aren't paying attention. Indexed universal life, as far as I'm concerned, is the new future problem. And again, it's up to us to advise clients to look forward rather than backward. It's better for your practice. It's better for your client. And for those that are interested in learning more about some of the items that we discussed, in your handout, there's a discounted flyer for our book. Again, as courtesy to Trusts and Estates, we've made that author's discount available to our audience. It's part of your handouts. And I think it's time to take some questions from the attendees. So, Susan, back to you.
Okay, thank you. We do have some questions, so let's get started. You seem to suggest that an uptick in interest rates will create a more favorable life insurance environment for policy owners. So the question is, in light of the trauma suffered by the carrier during an extended period of low interest rates, shouldn't we expect some drag on the return prospects to policy well-being?
Well, I think it's going to take a matter of years before we begin seeing the good effects of that uptick. In other words, it's not going to happen within the next few months. I think it'll take a number of years before we can actually begin seeing some of the benefits, whether it be increased dividends or whether it be the ability of being able to increase the duration or decrease the premium. It's not going to happen overnight.
Okay. Well, this one seems to be directed to Henry. One of the most significant issues facing the aging population is long-term care needs, and most are inadequately insured. Do you have any recommendations as to where clients should be addressing these concerns with either existing life insurance policies or new policies using 1035 transfers on a cost-efficient basis?
It's a great question and something that's very near and dear to my heart. In 2006, the Pension Protection Act came about, and it became effective January 1st of 2010. It took the insurance industry until 2012 to begin coming out with products, that combination products, hybrid products, that allow an individual to withdraw money from the death benefit of an insurance policy to be able to be used to pay for long-term care. It's a very important tool, and in light of the fact that our actuaries have incorrectly priced long-term care insurance from the get-go, people are gun-shy. They're afraid of the 40, 50, 60% increases that we've seen from major companies. So in addition to the traditional standalone products, I wholeheartedly agree with the individual who asked that question, that we should consider doing 1035 exchanges to new products that first became available after 2012 to supplement an individual's need to pay for long-term care insurance.